Good morning, dear students. This is Preetha from Department of Biology. Today we are starting off with the first chapter, the living world. All of you know that what is biology? So you know biology is nothing but study of living organisms, okay, or study of life. So in this first chapter, that is the living world, we will study about different types of living organisms, their characteristic features, okay. So when we say living organisms, you know that Earth has so many varieties of living organisms, different species of plants, varieties of animals, and even the single-celled microorganisms. So all different types of animals or plants, you know that they survive in different types of habitats. So when you see all that, you feel the life is so beautiful. Different types of organisms living in different types of habitat. For example, we can take deciduous forests or desert, ocean, freshwater bodies, in all, even the cold mountains. So everywhere you will see varieties of living organisms. Or even when we go to the molecular level, we see how a cell divides, how DNA replication takes place, how different molecules enter into the cell, how it exits the cell. So when we study all these different types of animals, plants, and all this, when we study in the cellular level also, what comes to our mind is, okay, what is life? Okay. So when I say the question, what is life, you can actually see, we can answer it in two ways. Okay. So the first one is with the scientific knowledge, we can say what is life. The other one is philosophical. Okay. So there we say what is the purpose of life and all that. So we are not going to bother about that. We will study what is life with the scientific knowledge. Based on science, we are going to study what is life. Now, if I ask you or show you an organism and I ask you whether it is living or non-living, within a fraction of a second, easily you can differentiate which is living and which is non-living. So on what basis will you differentiate it? So you will look for certain characters. Okay, so based on certain characters, you will classify something as living or non-living. So what are those general characters? Okay, we will study now. So first we are going to study about the general characters, or we say characteristic features of living organisms. Okay, so characteristic features of living organisms. So when we say something is living, okay, so some characters which we look for example, it may be growth, those are the general ones which we look for, growth, reproduction. Okay, apart from that, we can also think of some other characters like metabolism, okay, ability to self-replicate, self-organize. Okay, so all that one by one we will study. So first character, the first characteristic feature which we are going to discuss now is growth. Now you know all living organisms will grow. Now when we say grow, you should know that there are two things which comes under this. Now see, increase of mass, okay, and also increase of number of individuals. Both are considered as twin characters of growth. Now, when we say growth, both can be considered as growth, that is increase in mass and also increase of number of individuals. So, we say these are the twin characters of growth. Okay. Now, when we say growth, all living organisms will grow. Now, when we consider a multicellular organism, you know that it grows by cell division. Okay. So, cell division happens for the growth. Now, when we speak about plants, now in plants we usually see that the growth takes place throughout its lifespan. Okay. The plants grows continuously, whereas in animals the growth by cell division, it is only up to a certain stage. Okay. But even after that cell division will happen, but that is only to replace the lost cells or the damaged cells of the body. Apart from that, you see that growth as such is only up to a certain age. Okay. That is about plants and animals. Now, what about unicellular organisms? Now, unicellular organism also grows. Now, when we say unicellular organism grows, we have to observe it under the microscope. And you will also see that, for example, bacteria, okay, or amoeba, unicellular organism, they also will grow, and what we see is nothing but the cell division. So, one cell dividing into 2, 2 into 4, that is nothing but the growth of unicellular organisms. Only in multicellular organisms, we see that growth, reproduction is two exclusive events. Okay, they are two separate events, whereas in unicellular organism, okay, growth is also nothing but cell division. Reproduction is also nothing but cell division. So, we will speak about that further also when we speak about reproduction. So, here keep in mind, okay, so in unicellular organisms we say that the cell division takes place, that is growth. Okay, so we can see that under the microscope. Okay, now let's concentrate on this increase in mass. Okay, so increase in mass, so increase in weight, increase in size, all that is considered, which we consider as growth. Here we say increase of number of individuals. So, as I told, in unicellular organism is a single cell organism is an individual. So, it divides into 2. Okay, that is increase in number of individuals, that is also considered as growth. Now, increase in mass. Now, when we consider this, if this is taken as a criteria to study about the growth or to say what is growth, now we take some other examples, like for example, you can think about mountains, okay, mountains, sand dunes also, they will also grow. You will see increase in height of mountains and even the sand dunes. Now, we told increase in mass is considered as growth. So, we are saying mountains are also increasing in height. But can we call it as a living organism just because it grows? No, that cannot be considered as a living character. Okay, so you should know the difference. A non-living thing also grows. It may increase in height, but that growth is only because of accumulation of materials on the surface. Okay, whereas growth in a living organism is from within the body, because of cell division happening within the body, it grows. So, that is a difference. So, growth can be considered as one of the character of living organism. Okay, but we cannot say that it is a defining character. Okay, so because I gave you example of non-living things also which grows. So, growth is considered as one of the characteristic feature of living organisms. That is the first characteristic feature. Now, we move on to the second one, that is reproduction. Now, reproduction is also one of the characteristic feature of living organisms. So when we say reproduction, you know that the production of progeny or the offspring, which is almost like similar to its parent. Okay, so we are speaking about sexual reproduction here. So you know all the higher animals and plants, we see that they go for sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction we see usually in the higher plants and higher animals. Now apart from this, we see that the lower forms of plants or animals, we see that they go for asexual reproduction. Okay. So when we say asexual reproduction, as I told, so many of the different lower forms of organisms, like even for example fungi. Okay, so if you take example of fungi, we will see that asexual spores are produced. Okay, and also if you take algae, lower forms of algae, the lower form of plant called as bryophytes, you will see that fragmentation takes place. Okay, so fragmentation, that is the thallus will just breaks into different smaller pieces, which we call as fragment, and we call it as fragmentation. Okay, so one more thing is in animals. Okay, some animals like planaria, you will see the body, in case it gets fragmented. Okay, accidentally, if it gets fragmented, each fragment or each piece can become a new organism. It will just regenerate its the lost part and becomes a new organism. So these are the different types of asexual reproductions. Okay, along with that, you would have heard about yeast, which goes for budding as asexual reproduction. So all these are different forms of asexual reproduction. So I told you fragmentation, okay, budding. Okay, so along with this, I told you about regeneration. Okay. So these are certain forms, and also I told about spores. Certain asexual spores are produced for reproduction. That is, all these are asexual means of reproduction. Okay. So along with this, there are so many different other types of asexual reproduction. Okay. So we see sexual means of reproduction or asexual forms of reproduction. Now, when we speak about reproduction, so we say it is one of the characteristic features of living organisms. Okay. Now, till now we spoke about multicellular ones. What about unicellular organisms like bacteria, amoeba? How do they reproduce? For them, it is nothing but cell division. So, previously when I was speaking about growth, I told you in unicellular organisms, growth is nothing but cell division. And also reproduction in unicellular organism, again it's nothing but cell division. Okay, so in unicellular organisms, reproduction and growth, okay, there is no differentiation, it's both the things what we say is nothing but cell division. Okay, now till now we say, okay, all living organisms reproduce, it produces an offspring in whichever way, asexual or sexual form. Okay. Now, in case if we take this as a criteria to differentiate living and non-living, what about certain examples I'll say you. Now, there are like few couples who don't have kids, okay, or honeybees, okay, worker honeybees, we say they are sterile, they are not reproducing, okay, they are living but don't reproduce. Okay. So, with these examples, what we can conclude is reproduction is one of the characteristic features of living organisms, but not the defining feature. On with the next general character, that is metabolism. Now, all living organisms are made up of different types of chemicals. Okay. So, within the body of the organism, different types of chemicals are synthesized, and also certain different types of chemicals are converted from one form to the other. So, the synthesis of chemicals, the conversion of these chemicals, all that is nothing but chemical reactions taking place within the body. So, it may be a unicellular organism or a multicellular organism, but we will see different types of chemical reactions happening within the body of the organism. Now, when we say chemical reactions, we put all the chemical reaction together. So, when we consider all the sum total of all the chemical reactions happening within the body of the organism, we call it as metabolism. Okay. So, what is metabolism? It is the sum total of all the chemical reactions taking place within the body of the organism. Okay. That is metabolism. Now, the same chemical reactions, what is happening within the body of an organism, we can actually say that the same chemical reactions can happen within the test tube. Okay. So, we can do the same reaction in a test tube, but when the same reaction is happening in a test tube, we do not call it as living organism, we just say it is a living reaction, because chemical reaction is happening there. Okay. But when the reaction is happening within the cell, within the body of the organism, we use the term metabolism. Okay. And we say it as living. So, here we should think, so what is that difference? The chemical reaction happening within the cell, we say it as life, it is living. When the same thing happens in a test tube, we just say it is a living reaction. So, here what should we consider? Now, here we say the cellular organization or the cellular nature, okay, that is the defining feature of living organism, because the cell, when the reaction is happening within the cell, that is life. When the reaction is happening outside the cell, we do not call it as life, we just say it is a living reaction. So, the cellular nature or the cellular organization, that is the defining feature of living organism. Okay. So, that is about metabolism. We will move on to the next general character. Response to stimuli. Now, you know, every living organism can sense the environment, whether it is a plant, whether it is an animal, okay, we can feel the environment, they are aware of the environment, and also that for the changes which happens within the environment, the organism will respond, which we call as response to stimulus. So, when we say response, okay, the plants or the animals, so even plants, okay, we say that they will respond to the environment. In what way? They will respond to the light, the temperature, okay, and also in the seasonal breeders, okay, even in plants, the seasonal flowering plants. So, there you see that the photoperiod affects the reproduction. Okay. So, when we see all this, we can come to a conclusion that response to the stimuli, any stimulus in the environment, okay, the plant or an animal, they can sense the environment and also they can respond. Okay. But we say that the human beings, the most evolved one, okay, we say the consciousness we see in the organism where they can feel or sense the environment and also respond. Whereas in human beings we say we are self-conscious. Okay, so only human beings are self-conscious, all other organisms are conscious about the surrounding environment. So, response to stimuli can also be considered as one of the general character. Now, as I told, consciousness, this can also be considered as the defining feature of the living organism. Now, these are some of the general characters which usually comes to our mind when we say differentiate living and non-living. Now, along with this, we also say there are so many like few other things also, like okay, so movement can also be considered as the general character. Okay, so general character, usually like almost all different organisms move, they show movement in different ways. Now even plants, they show movement with response to the different factors of the environment. Okay, so this is also one of the general character. Now when we study the general characters, I have told you about certain defining features like cellular organization, consciousness. Okay, so these can be considered as the defining feature of living organism. Now when we study in detail about all the general characters, okay, and when we study in depth, we get to know that the character of a living organism or a particular property of a tissue or an organ, it doesn't lie within a constituent cell or a particular cell. The property arises because of the interaction of the constituent cells within the tissue, within the organ. Okay, so that interaction between the cells, gives that property of a particular tissue. So that is about the general characters of living organisms. So with this, we get to know that what are living organisms. So you know that they are self-replicating, evolving, interacting with the environment. Okay, so that is about living organisms. Now this general character of living organisms can be asked as a 5 marks question. So that's all for today. We will continue in the next session. Thank you.